The kettle whistled softly. Steam curled in the cold morning air. Miss Marple moved with her usual calm precision cup, saucer, spoon, 1 sugar. Outside, St Mary Mead was white with frost. A postman's whistle drifted faintly down the lane. The hour was early, too early for gossip, just right for reflection. She straightened the lace doily on her table, then reached for her letters. 3 envelopes. 2 were ordinary bills, circulars, small annoyances of civilized life. The third made her pause. Cream paper, thick, good quality. Her name written in neat blue ink script. She frowned. That was her own handwriting. Exactly hers, the slope of the J, the loop in the M. Even the tiny hesitation before Marple, the mark she always left when her pen paused to think. She turned it over. Sealed neatly, the gum unbroken. Postmark St Mary Mead. Dated this morning. Impossible. She hadn't posted anything. Not for 3 days. Her blue ink bottle sat untouched on the shelf. A knock came. Mrs. Bantry, bright-cheeked and wrapped in her fur-collared coat, peered in. "Morning, Jane. You've heard the post come? Mine's nothing but catalogues." She spotted the envelope in Marple's hand. "Oh, something elegant. Who's been writing to you?" Miss Marple studied it again. "I'm afraid. I have." Dolly blinked. "You've what?" "It appears to be my own hand." Dolly laughed. "Perhaps a kind admirer practicing forgery." Marple didn't smile. Her thumb traced the edge of the paper. The seal was pressed firm, as if with purpose. Not playful, not accidental. She slid a letter knife beneath the flap. The paper yielded with a sigh. Inside a single folded sheet. No address, no date. The same blue ink. The same careful writing. Just 6 words. "Thank you for keeping my secret." Miss Marple sat very still. The fire crackled faintly. Outside, the postman's whistle faded into silence. Dolly leaned closer. "What secret, Jane?" Marple's eyes moved over the words again. Each letter perfectly shaped. Each dot exactly where she'd have placed it. A mirror of her own thought, written by another hand or another time. She held the page to the light. Faint shadows behind the writing impressions, as though pressed through from something typed beneath it. Not visible, but real. She could feel the grooves with her fingertip. "Whoever did this," she said softly, "understands imitation far too well." Dolly shrugged. "Then it's a prank, someone having their bit of fun." Marple folded the note carefully. "No, my dear. Pranks amuse the writer, not the reader. This feels like a message unfinished." Dolly reached for her scarf. "Perhaps you'll know who by tea time." "Perhaps," said Marple. She glanced toward the window. The frost was melting now, thin lines of water tracing down the glass like ink run wild. She watched one droplet pause midway, quivering about to fall. Then she looked back at the letter. The paper trembled faintly in her hand, because beneath the 6 words, there was something else. Faint, almost hidden, indented just enough to see if you knew how to look. One more word. Pressed, not written. A name. Her own. She had written to herself. The fire burned low. Morning light stretched across the carpet, thin and cold. Miss Marple sat at her table, spectacles perched halfway down her nose. The strange letter lay before her. She had read it 3 times. Now she studied the envelope itself. The paper was smooth, heavy linen stock, the kind used for invitations or condolences. The flap sealed clean, no wax, just gum pressed firm. Postmarked Street. Mary Mead, 7:45 a.m. that morning. She turned it slowly in her hands. Front, back, corner to corner. Her own handwriting stared back at her like a reflection in water. Identical. Measured. Personal. She reached for her magnifying glass, the small silver one she kept for embroidery thread. Under its lens, the blue ink darkened. Not fountain ink. Not exactly. It was slightly thicker, the way hers appeared when she wrote quickly and pressed hard. She sighed. Not a copy. Not traced. Her tone was quiet, more to herself than to Dolly. Mrs. Bantry was stirring sugar into her tea. quite oblivious to mystery. "My dear Jane, someone's had a bit of fun. People do these things, you know. Little jokes." "Jokes," Marple murmured, "require laughter." Dolly shrugged. "Well, it's charmingly done, if you ask me. If anyone wrote me such a neat hand, I'd frame it." Marple smiled faintly. "The trouble, Dolly, is that I could have written it. Every stroke is mine, but I didn't." She laid the envelope beside a genuine letter she'd penned yesterday, a note to her niece in Torquay. Side by side, they were indistinguishable. Same blue, same rhythm, same gentle left-leaning slope. "Could someone have copied your hand?" Dolly asked. Marple shook her head. "To imitate writing so precisely requires either obsession or guilt." Her eyes drifted toward the window. The postman's footprints still showed faintly in the frost. She rose, wrapping her shawl tighter, and examined the postmark again. Stamped at the local office. She tapped the corner thoughtfully. "The machine's mark is correct, the timing exact. That means it passed through the postal desk." Dolly frowned. "Meaning what?" "Meaning," said Marple, "it was accepted as genuine mail." She fetched a small notebook and began to jot times. The first collection, the delivery schedule, the distance from her cottage to the post office. Her pencil paused. If this was posted at 7:45, it must have been handed in at least 15 minutes earlier. Then the sender was awake before dawn, Dolly said. Awake and deliberate. Marple opened the letter again, smoothing it flat with her palm. The ink shimmered faintly in the light. Still fresh, not yet fully set into the fibers. She touched the edge. With a tissue, a faint blue smear appeared. Hours old, not days. Her voice was almost a whisper. Someone wrote this at first light. Dolly poured more tea, trying to sound casual. "You're making a mystery out of a note, Jane. You'll have half the village under suspicion before luncheon." Marple didn't answer. Her gaze lingered on the return address in the top corner, Dane Mead Cottage, St Mary Mead, her address, her pen, her ink. But the stamp, the small red one, was crooked, just slightly, pressed down by a left thumb instead of a right, and the gum residue showed 2 layers, as if the stamp had been moved once, then fixed again. She set the magnifying glass down slowly. The fire popped. Outside, the postman's whistle faded beyond the hedge. Miss Marple leaned back, eyes narrowing. "No, Dolly," she said quietly. "Whoever sent this knows my writing too well." Quiet, deliberate tension holds in the air. The bell above the post office door jingled softly. Cold air followed Miss Marple and Mrs. Bantry inside. The scent of paper, soap, and sealing wax hung still in the morning air. Behind the polished counter stood Colin Treadgold, the young clerk with sandy hair and nervous manners. He straightened immediately. "Good morning, Miss Marple. Mrs. Bantry. Cold one, isn't it?" "Quite," said Miss Marple, removing her gloves carefully. "Colin, we're inquiring about an envelope. Cream paper, fine stock, addressed to me." He blinked. "Oh, yes, ma'am. I remember that one clearly. Dropped off early before 8, I'd say." Marple's voice was calm. "By whom?" Colin frowned, searching memory. "It came in a red leather pouch. We get a few of those every morning from regulars. Saves time sorting." Dolly leaned forward, curious. "And who uses red pouches, dear boy?" "Only 2 that I know of, ma'am." He ticked them off on his fingers. "Dr. Haydock, when he sends specimens or medical reports. And Reverend Clement, for parish correspondence. Both marked with initials on the clasp." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "Which clasp did you see?" Colin hesitated. I didn't look close. Just opened it, checked the contents, and stamped the items for dispatch. The pouch was collected by the driver as usual. You didn't notice whether it was the doctor's or the reverend's?" He shook his head. "They're much alike, miss. Red leather, brass clasp. Only the initials tell them apart, and I didn't stop to check." Marple exchanged a glance with Dolly. "One of them must have delivered it." "Likely an assistant," Dolly offered, "or someone running errands." Colin looked uneasy. "No one else should have access to those pouches. They're kept locked when not in use." Marple thanked him gently and asked if she might see the ledger. He fetched the large book from behind the counter, neat columns, precise entries. She ran a finger down the morning line. 7:45. Incoming from red pouch 3 letters. 1 to Torquay, 1 to London, 1 to St Mary Mead. Her own name written in neat script. A perfect copy of her handwriting. Even the way she crossed her T. She closed the ledger quietly. Thank you, Colin. That will do. Outside, the air bit sharper now. Frost lingered on the railings. Dolly pulled her scarf tighter. So what do we think, Jane? Doctor or Reverend? Marple's steps were slow, measured. Both are early risers. Both keep red pouches. Both were seen in the village this morning. But they can't both have sent it, Dolly said. No, Marple murmured. One of them didn't send anything at all. They turned the corner by the churchyard. Smoke rose from the vicarage chimney. A figure moved inside the study window, Reverend Clement, reading his morning post. Across the lane, Dr. Haydock's motor car stood already warm, its engine humming. Dolly glanced between the 2 houses. Shall we ask? In time, said Marple. Her eyes stayed on the church spire against the pale sky. Something about that pouch, that quiet routine of morning delivery, it hid more than letters. She touched the envelope in her coat pocket, her name in her own hand, posted from nowhere, by no one. Her voice was soft but certain. Then whose pouch delivered a letter that wrote itself? The village holds its breath. Back at Danemead Cottage, the fire was steady now. The air smelled faintly of toast and polish. Miss Marple sat once again at her small oak table. The letter lay open before her, pale against the dark wood. Dolly Bantry hovered nearby, restless. Well, Jane, you've stared at that paper for half an hour. You'll burn a hole clean through it. Marple didn't look up. Do you smell it, Dolly? Smell it? My dear, it's a letter, not a stew. Lavender, said Marple softly, and coal smoke, faint, but there. Dolly leaned in, sniffed, frowned. Why, so it does. Reminds me of Reverend Clement's study. That old stove of his always leaves soot in the curtains. Marple nodded. Indeed. And lavender is Mrs. Clement's favourite drawer sachet. The scent would cling to her stationery, except this is not hers. She pointed with her knitting needle to the fold. Mrs. Clement's paper has an embossed margin. This does not. This is mine from my own writing box. Dolly's mouth opened, then closed. You're suggesting the letter was written in your house? Perhaps, Marple murmured. Or by someone who borrowed what was mine. She picked up the page with tweezers, careful not to smudge the ink. The words were few, each letter deliberate. Thank you for keeping my secret. No name, no date, no greeting, no farewell. Dolly shivered. It feels unfinished. Or final, said Marple quietly. Like a sentence whispered before the door closes. She turned the sheet over. A faint impression showed through marks of another page pressed above it. Traces of typewriter keys, shallow but clear beneath the light. She tilted it closer to the window. There, she whispered. The letter E is slightly higher than the rest. A misaligned key. Mabel Finch's typewriter, Dolly said at once. She types all the church notices on that machine. Yes, Marple's tone was thoughtful. And Mabel was at the post office yesterday afternoon, helping Colin with forms. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a cart rattled down the lane. Somewhere, a church bell struck 11 thin, uncertain notes in the winter air. Dolly broke the quiet. But what secret could anyone think you're keeping? Marple smiled faintly. My dear Dolly, people imagine one keeps far more secrets than one truly does. Observation looks like knowledge. She folded the letter again, precise as a ledger entry, and slipped it back into its envelope. Still, she added, the scent, the ink, the origin, all deliberate choices. Someone wished this to appear familiar, to comfort, before it alarmed. Dolly sighed, pulling her shawl closer. Well, I don't like it. Coal smoke and secrets never end tidy. Marple rose, crossed to her desk, and took up her ink bottle. Blew her own brand, Parker Quink. She dabbed a drop onto blotting paper. The shade matched perfectly. Yet when she held it beside the letter, the sheen was off, thicker, oilier. A different hand, a different bottle. She looked toward the window, where smoke from the vicarage chimney curled into the pale sky. The scent of coal drifted faintly through the air. Her eyes narrowed. "And yet," she murmured, "Reverend Clement never writes with blue ink. The truth hides behind the lavender smoke." Snow had fallen through the night. Not heavy, just a fine dusting, soft as sifted sugar. By Morning Street, Mary Mead looked washed clean, every roof white, every hedge frosted to silence. Miss Marple stepped out carefully, shawl tight against the cold. The world felt still. Too still. Only one sound broke it, the steady crunch of boots along the lane. The postman, Mr. Briggs, broad and cheerful, appeared through the mist with his red bag slung over his shoulder. He tipped his cap when he saw her. "Morning, Miss Marple. Roads are slippery today, nearly lost me footing twice." "Good morning, Mr. Briggs," she said kindly. "You delivered early." "Had to. Snow slows everything. Started my round at 6:30. Her gaze drifted toward the gate, the same gate where yesterday's mysterious envelope had arrived. Fresh prints trailed along the path. 2 lines, neat, close together, distinct. "Those footprints," she said softly. "You made them." He looked down, puzzled. "These big ones. Yes, that's me, size 10. But those smaller ones? No, ma'am. They were there when I came by." Marple crouched slightly, examining the snow. The smaller tracks pressed deep and narrow. Light person, narrow heel, short stride. Someone had walked to her gate, paused, then turned back. "What time was this, Mr. Briggs?" "Just after 6, I'd say. Still dim out. The sky had that blue tinge before sunrise." She looked up. "Did you notice anyone on the road?" "No one. Just them marks. Surprised me, really. The postbag was full, but nothing missing." "No letters taken?" "Not a one." She followed the prints with her eyes. They came from the lane, not from any house. They stopped at her gate, then turned back exactly along the same line, step for step. Whoever made them had been careful not to stray. Dolly Bantry appeared behind her, wrapped in fur and curiosity. "Jane, you're out playing detective before breakfast again?" Marple smiled faintly. "One must study evidence before it melts." Dolly bent to look. "My word, that's a woman's shoe. Look at the size, dainty as a doll's." "Yes," said Marple. "And early. Before sunrise. Perhaps before sense." She turned to Briggs. "Did you check your bag before you started?" "Always do. Count every letter. The clerk seals it proper." "Then whoever came wasn't after your post," she said. "They came for mine." Dolly shivered. "It's ghostly, Jane. A letter that writes itself and a visitor who leaves no name." Marple didn't answer. Her eyes traced the neat prints one last time. The heels were narrow, but the soles were worn unevenly, left edge thinner, a slight inward turn. Distinctive. She'd seen that walk somewhere before in the village, perhaps at the church, perhaps near the post office counter. Someone who leaned ever so slightly left when standing still. Snowflakes began to fall again, soft and quiet, blurring the evidence inch by inch. Briggs tipped his cap once more. "I'll be off, Miss Marple. Rounds long today." She nodded absently, still staring at the fading pattern. When the prints finally vanished under new snow, she spoke almost to herself. "They'll melt before I prove it, but I know that stride." Dolly frowned. "Who's Jane?" Marple's voice was calm, steady, but none matched the shoes of anyone living nearby. "The trail leads nowhere, and yet begins right at her gate." The afternoon passed quietly in St Mary Mead. Snow softened into slush, dripping from gutters in steady rhythm. Miss Marple sat by the window, knitting untouched in her lap. The letter lay on the side table, its edges curling faintly in the fire's warmth. A gentle knock sounded, 3 polite taps. Then the door creaked open. "Mabel Finch," announced a small, careful voice. "Forgive me dropping by uninvited, Miss Marple. Mrs. Bantry said you were in need of typing assistance." Marple looked up, smiling. "Ah, Miss Finch. Do come in. The kettle's just boiled." Mabel entered, coat buttoned high, fingers gloved, though the room was warm. She was a tidy woman, neat bun, grey cardigan, a trace of ink on one cuff. Her hands trembled faintly when she removed her gloves. "I hear you've received something unusual," she said, tone light but curious. Dolly, already perched near the fire, nodded eagerly. "A letter, dear. A most peculiar one. You simply must look." Mabel sat, smoothing her skirt. "May I?" Marple handed over the sheet carefully. "Examine the back, if you will. You'll notice faint impressions." Mabel tilted the paper toward the light. Her practiced fingers traced the surface gently. "You're right," she murmured. "There's pressure marks as if it lay under another page while someone typed." Her brow furrowed. "The keys are uneven, see? The letter E strikes slightly higher. It's off alignment." Marple watched her closely. "Common fault?" "Not common," said Mabel softly. "There's only one machine in the village with that misalignment, mine." Dolly raised her brows. "Oh, surely you don't mean—" Mabel gave a nervous laugh. "Pure coincidence, I'm sure. I use that typewriter daily. Keys wear unevenly. Could happen to anyone." Marple leaned forward slightly. "And yet, the pressure marks match your spacing perfectly. 10-pitch model, manual carriage, stiff return." Mabel looked startled. "My goodness, you notice everything." "I notice patterns," said Marple quietly. "Machines have habits, just like people. They leave fingerprints." Mabel set the letter down, fingers tapping against her teacup. "Perhaps someone borrowed my office while I was out. My door isn't always locked. I trust my neighbors." "Quite right," said Marple. "But borrowing implies purpose. Someone chose your machine specifically." Mabel's eyes flicked toward the fire. "For what purpose, do you think?" Marple's answer was calm. "To create the illusion of familiarity. To write a message that looked like it came from here, from one of us." The clock ticked softly. Outside, a robin chirped once, quick and sharp against the quiet. Mabel sipped her tea, hands steady now. "Strange business," she said at last. "No name, no sender, no reason. And yet so precise." Marple nodded. "Too precise. When imitation becomes perfect, it stops being harmless." Dolly stood, restless. "Then whoever wrote it, Jane, knows us all too well." Marple smiled faintly. "Knows us, or lives among us." Mabel set the letter carefully back on the table. Her fingers lingered on the edge just a moment too long. Then she rose, smoothing her cardigan, voice quiet but trembling slightly. "Miss Marple," she said, "I'll tell you the truth of it." Marple waited, eyes steady. Mabel's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Except I never typed this, Miss Marple. Someone used my machine." The words hang in the warm stillness like smoke that refuses to fade. The vicarage always smelled faintly of polish, coal dust and lavender. A comforting mix, familiar as the Sunday bell. Miss Marple knew every corner, the soft ticking clock in the hallway, the creak of the step near the study door. Dolly Bantry followed behind her, hat slightly askew from the wind. "I told you, Jane," she whispered. "It's rude to call without notice." "Curiosity," Marple murmured, "is a social offense only when it's wrong." They were met by Mrs. Clement, cheeks flushed, apron dusted with flour. "Oh, Miss Marple, Mrs. Bantry. How lovely, though I'm afraid tea's only just brewing." "Not to worry," said Marple kindly. "We won't keep you long." As they stepped inside, the warmth met them like a quilt. The sitting-room fire burned bright. Reverend Clement stood near the mantel, spectacles in hand, brows furrowed over some invisible thought. He looked up, startled. "My dear Miss Marple, always a pleasure. Forgive me, my mind's quite elsewhere this morning." "Matters of faith?" she asked lightly. "Matters of post," he replied with a small laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Clement glanced quickly toward the side table. A half-opened envelope lay there. Cream paper, blue ink script, faintly curled at the edge. She moved without thinking, sliding a hymn book neatly over it. Marple's gaze followed the motion, polite but unyielding. "Ah," she said softly. "The Morning Post brings its share of surprises today." Mrs. Clement hesitated. "Oh, just a letter. Nothing important. Parish notice, perhaps." "Of course," said Marple and smiled. But her eyes lingered on the table, where a faint scent drifted up lavender and coal smoke. The same delicate mix that had haunted her cottage since yesterday morning. Dolly took her tea with too much sugar. "So, Reverend, any sermons about mysterious letters this week?" He chuckled uneasily. "None yet, Mrs. Bantry, though perhaps I should consult Miss Marple before writing one." Marple stirred her tea slowly. "Did the post arrive on time today?" "As always," he said. "Colin's a punctual lad." "And yet," she said gently, "he mentioned a red pouch delivery before 8. I believe you use one?" "I do indeed," said Clement, frowning slightly. "But I sent nothing this morning. My pouch is still locked in my study." Mrs. Clement set down her cup too quickly. The china clinked. A drop of tea spilled on her sleeve. She rose to fetch a cloth, but not before Marple's eyes caught the hymn book again, slightly askew now, its corner revealing a glimpse of the envelope beneath. She waited until Mrs. Clement returned, composed once more. Marple spoke mildly. "It's odd, isn't it, how letters seem to arrive where they're not expected, and sometimes twice in the same place?" The Reverend smiled uncertainly. "Twice?" She opened her reticule and withdrew her own envelope, identical paper, identical blue script. Dolly gasped softly. The Reverend leaned forward, astonished. "My word, they're the same." Marple nodded. "Same paper, same hand, same faint scent." "And the postmark?" She held them side by side. Both stamped St Mary Mead, 7:45 a.m. Silence filled the room. Only the clock ticked on the mantel, steady as a heartbeat. Marple folded them together neatly. "One letter found me," she said, "and another found you. Both say little, yet both say too much." Dolly looked between them, uneasy. "What does it mean?" Marple's eyes darkened. "Two letters, one sender, but one of them lied. The vicarage warmth suddenly feels colder than snow outside. By the next afternoon, the snow had turned to grey slush. The village lanes were quiet except for the crunch of boots and the call of a milk cart. Miss Marple sat by the fire, the kettle singing its steady tune. A knock came sharp, confident. Not the postman. "Come in," she called. The door opened, and Dr. Haydock stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. His face was ruddy from the cold, his eyes alert but kind. "Afternoon, Miss Marple. Thought I'd check on you. Frost's playing havoc with everyone's joints." "How considerate," she said warmly. "I assure you I'm quite well. Tea? Don't mind if I do," he said, settling into the chair near the fire. He rubbed his hands briskly, sighing. "Busy morning. Misplaced half my things again. My assistant's hopeless at keeping order." Marple poured 2 cups. "What have you lost this time?" He chuckled. "Oh, nothing serious. A stethoscope, a notebook, and 1 small bottle of iron blue ink. Expensive stuff, too. I use it for reports, doesn't fade under lamplight." Marple paused mid-pour. "Iron blue, you say?" "Yes. Same shade as your favorite, if I recall." She looked at him over her glasses. "Indeed. And when did you notice it missing?" "This morning. Bag's been rummaged through, though nothing else taken. I assumed one of my patients borrowed it for a prescription note." "Borrowed," she repeated softly. Her hand brushed against the envelope on the side table. The ink glimmered faintly under the light thicker than hers, darker at the edges. Dr. Haydock followed her glance. "Ah, yes, the mysterious letter. Mrs. Bantry told me. You're quite the village headline, Jane." She smiled faintly. "I fear the excitement is mostly ink and imagination." He leaned forward. "May I?" "Of course." He studied the script, nodding. Not bad handwriting. Very neat, strong pressure, and definitely iron blue. "You're certain?" "Positive. I'd know that color anywhere. It stains fingers worse than iodine." Marple's knitting rested forgotten in her lap. "So your bottle went missing the day before this letter arrived?" He blinked. "Well, yes, that's right. Strange coincidence," she murmured. "Someone in this village used your ink to write in my hand." He frowned. "But why? Surely no harm in it." Marple folded the letter again, precise and slow. Imitation, she said quietly, is rarely harmless, its intent disguised as familiarity. Haydock chuckled uneasily. Spoken like a philosopher. Like a realist, she corrected. Her eyes lingered on the blue ink. It shimmered slightly, alive in the light. He rose to leave, buttoning his coat. Well, if my ink turns up, I'll let you know. Doubt it's of much importance. On the contrary, said Marple softly, it may be the most important thing of all. He laughed, tipping his hat. You see mysteries everywhere. When the door closed, she turned to the fire again. The letter gleamed faintly on the table, the same hue as Haydock's missing ink. Her fingers traced the curve of her name, the way the color deepened at every loop. Someone had written it with care, someone who knew her hand, someone who'd stolen the means to copy it perfectly. Her voice was barely a whisper. Someone wanted not the ink, but what it could imitate. The theft wasn't random, it was rehearsal. The post office was nearly empty that afternoon. Only the faint tick of the wall clock broke the quiet. Miss Marple entered slowly, the doorbell giving its soft jingle. Colin Treadgold looked up from behind the counter, startled. Good afternoon, Miss Marple. Back again? Indeed, she said gently. I'm afraid I have another question about your morning ledger. He hesitated. The ledger? I already showed it yesterday. Yes, she said, smiling kindly, and I've been thinking about it ever since. He fetched it from the drawer under the counter. The large book was old red leather spine, corners frayed, pages smudged with years of ink and fingertips. He opened it carefully. Neat lines of looping script filled the columns. Names, times, weights, destinations. Marple adjusted her spectacles. Her finger traced down the day's entries. Here, she said softly. 7:45, red pouch delivery, 3 items. She leaned closer. The line shimmered faintly under the light as though 2 inks had met and disagreed. The time was written twice, one figure scratched out, another written over it in darker blue. She tilted the page. The original number showed faintly beneath. 7:30. Colin, she said calmly. Why the change? His face went pink. I didn't change anything, ma'am. I write the times straight after each delivery. But someone has corrected you. He looked down at the ledger, frowning. Strange. It wasn't like that this morning. You're quite sure? Yes, Miss Marple. I remember because the ink was barely dry when you came in. I never used darker blue. Marple nodded. This shade is heavier. It matches Dr. Haydock's iron blue ink. Colin blinked. Dr. Haydock's. What would he be doing with our ledger? Nothing, she said gently, which makes it more troubling that his missing ink appears here. He turned a few pages back, confused. Mabel Finch helped with sorting that morning. She's allowed behind the counter when we're busy. She might have touched it, but she'd never alter records. She's far too careful. Marple's eyes were steady. Careful people make the best forgers, Colin. They don't rush. He swallowed hard. You think this is part of that strange letter business? I think, she said quietly, someone wants to control time itself, at least, how it appears in writing. The bell above the door rang again. A gust of cold air swept through. Mrs. Finch herself stepped in, hat tilted, gloves spotless. She smiled politely. Oh, Miss Marple, I didn't expect to see you here again. Still chasing your little mystery? Marple returned the smile. Just tying loose ends, my dear. Mabel's eyes flicked toward the ledger, only for a second. But in that second, Marple saw the flicker of awareness, recognition, fear. Colin shut the book. Shall I lock it away, ma'am? Yes, said Marple softly, in the drawer, somewhere safe. As he turned the key, Marple watched Mabel's gloved hands tighten around her purse. She wasn't looking at the drawer, she was avoiding it. Outside, the wind rattled the shop sign. The air felt colder than before. Marple's voice was barely a whisper. A forgery made to hide a forgery. Truth covered by ink, twice written, never erased. It arrived the next morning. Folded clean, cream paper, blue ink, no return address. Miss Marple found it tucked halfway through her gate, the handwriting again her own. But the name on the front was not hers. She turned it slowly in her hands. Mrs. Dolly Bantry. The same careful lettering, the same slanted R, even the slight pause in the downstroke of the Y. Her breath left her in a quiet sigh. Another letter. Same hand, same illusion. She placed it on the table beside the first. Two mirrors facing each other, identical, and yet not. Moments later, the bell rang. Dolly Bantry swept in, wrapped in her green coat and impatience. "Jane, you'll never believe what's happened." Marple held up the envelope. Dolly stopped mid-sentence. "What in heaven's name is that?" "It's addressed to you." "To me? Here?" Marple nodded. "It was delivered this morning. I thought best to wait for you." Dolly pulled off her gloves, fingers trembling just slightly. She stared at the handwriting, her brow furrowed. "It's your writing again, Jane. I swear it's yours." "I know." Dolly looked uncertain. "Should I open it?" Marple poured tea, calm as ever. "Better you do it here. I'd rather not have another mystery unattended." The room was quiet except for the sound of paper tearing. Dolly unfolded the letter with care. Her eyes moved over the short line. Then she froze. Her lips parted. She read the words again, aloud this time, voice unsteady. "Thank you for keeping silent. No signature. No date. The same blue ink." Dolly's hands lowered slowly. What does that mean?" Marple's gaze was thoughtful. "Apparently, gratitude. But for what, I wonder?" Dolly's voice wavered. "I haven't kept anything silent, Jane. I've told you everything." "Of course you have," Marple said softly. "But someone believes otherwise." Dolly set the letter down, frowning. "It's like being accused of a sin I don't remember committing." Marple picked up both letters, hers and Dolly's, holding them side by side. The ink was identical, the strokes matched perfectly. The scent, faint but familiar lavender and coal smoke. "Two letters," she murmured. "Two thank yous, both unsigned, both assuming complicity." Dolly rubbed her temples. "Do you suppose it's a prank? Someone playing with us?" "If so," Marple said, "they've a better sense of timing than humor." She set both letters flat on the table, aligning the edges. The paper creased in the same place, folded by the same hand. Dolly's voice was small now. "But why me, Jane? What could I possibly have to keep silent about?" Marple's eyes softened. "You know more than you realize, my dear. Everyone does. The village is built on small silences. Some are kind, some are not." Dolly swallowed hard. "I've done nothing wrong." "Of course not." Marple's tone was kind, but her eyes never left the letters. Yet both notes imply knowledge, one secret kept, one silence maintained. Someone is reminding us, or warning us. Dolly stood abruptly, pacing by the fire. Her reflection flickered in the glass cabinet. "It feels dreadful, Jane. As if someone's watching, weighing words, waiting for me to slip." Marple watched the steam rise from the teapot, swirling like faint ink in water. She spoke gently. "Whoever wrote these doesn't want laughter. They want unease. Unease breeds confession." Dolly stopped pacing. She turned, voice sharp with sudden fear. "Jane, you don't think they know about—" Marple looked up. "About what?" But Dolly didn't finish. Her face had gone still, eyes wide. The color drained from her cheeks, as if the warmth had left the room. Miss Marple stood slowly, concern softening her features. "Dolly?" The paper fluttered from Dolly's hand to the carpet. The ink caught the light, rich, heavy iron blue. Her teacup trembled slightly on the saucer. And when she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. "It can't be about that, Jane. It simply can't." Miss Marple tilted her head. Her expression didn't change. Only her voice dropped low, steady as ever. "Then why," she said, "has your face gone white? The second letter exposes a truth Dolly can't yet name." The next day was dim and windless. Clouds hung low over St Mary Mead, pressing against the rooftops. The village seemed quieter than usual, as if listening. Miss Marple arrived at Gossington Hall just after 10. Dolly Bantry had sent word, "Come quickly, Jane. There's something you must see. The front door opened before she could knock. Dolly stood there, pale, hair untidy, apron still on over her dressing gown. Jane, thank heavens. I didn't sleep a wink. Miss Marple stepped inside, calm as ever. What's troubled you, my dear? Dolly led her straight through the sitting room, past the breakfast tray and cold tea. In the kitchen, she said breathlessly. It's in the drawer. The kitchen was spotless, every surface gleaming except one. A drawer stood half open, its contents spread like the aftermath of a secret unpacked. Inside lay a handful of old photographs, edges curled, corners faded. Village faces caught in summer light smiling, waving, unaware of future winters. Dolly pointed with a trembling hand. This one, Jane. Look at this. Marple lifted the photograph gently. A village fete bunting, stalls, children clutching lemonade bottles. A long-ago afternoon frozen in grey tones. Near the centre stood Dr. Haydock, younger, thinner, hat tilted just so. Beside him, another man, fair-haired, laughing. Mabel Finch's brother, the late Harold Finch. Marple studied the scene in silence. Where did you find it? In that drawer, Dolly whispered. Under the tablecloths. I'd forgotten it even existed. But when I reached for the napkins this morning, it was on top as if someone had just placed it there. Marple turned the photo over. The back was blank at first glance. Then, as the light shifted, faint writing emerged, pencil nearly rubbed away. 2 words. Forgive me. Dolly clasped her hands. Jane, I don't understand. Why would it be in my drawer? Marple tilted the photo closer to the window. The graphite caught the light like dust on glass. This handwriting, she murmured, is the same size, same spacing, same curl of the F as the letter you received. Dolly stared at her. But that can't be. It's written in pencil. Handwriting transcends tools, said Marple softly. Personality shows through pressure. Harold Finch always pressed too hard. I remember his signatures on church raffle lists, half of them tore the paper. Dolly's brow creased. But Harold's been dead 5 years. Marple nodded. Indeed, which makes it remarkable that his apology appears today. She set the photograph beside the mysterious letters. Same paper tone. Same faint scent of lavender and smoke. Dolly's voice shook. Do you think Mabel found it? Maybe she put it there? Possible, said Marple. She worked in this house for years, didn't she? Helped with the fete, assisted you after Harold's passing. Yes, said Dolly quietly. She adored her brother, refused to believe his heart simply failed. Marple glanced again at Dr. Haydock's image in the photograph. He was smiling, but there was strain around the eyes, the kind of smile used to hold something back. Dolly whispered, You think there's something between them? I think, Marple said, there was something hidden between them. She placed the photograph flat on the table, smoothing its edges. The faint pencil marks seemed to deepen as the light dimmed. She reached for her small magnifying glass, running it over the surface. Every swirl of the graphite grew clear, deliberate, weighted. Her mouth tightened. The F, she murmured. The same downstroke, the same loop at the end. Dolly leaned in, breath held. You mean? Marple nodded slowly. The dead man's handwriting matched the note. The past, thought buried, begins to write again. The village slept. Even the church clock hesitated before striking 12. A fog had rolled in from the fields, pale and thin, wrapping the lampposts in silence. Miss Marple moved quietly along the lane, shawl drawn tight. Her boots made no sound on the damp cobblestones. The post office stood dark, only a faint orange glow slipped from the window blinds. Colin Treadgold had gone home hours ago, but Marple had asked for the spare key. Officially to look into the ledger once more. Unofficially to follow the scent of truth. She slipped inside. The air was heavy with paper, polish, and dust. A single lamp still burned over the sorting desk, left low, as if someone meant to return. She stood very still, listened. Nothing but the hum of quiet electricity and the slow tick of the clock above the counter. Then she moved. Each drawer opened softly under her hand, envelopes, stamps, sealing wax, ledgers stacked neatly. But on the far side of the desk, near the window, A thin sheet of paper caught the light, torn. Crumpled once, then flattened again. Marple picked it up carefully. Her fingers felt the ridges of pressure through the page, faint impressions, not writing. She tilted it toward the lamp. Underneath, shadows of letters appeared. Familiar ones. Curved and deliberate, her own hand, practiced again and again. Her name, written half a dozen times. Each trial slightly different, each closer to perfect. J. Marple. Jane Marple. J. E. Marple. The practice of someone who wanted to become her on paper. She examined the back. A patch of carbon smudge streaked across the lower edge, and beside it, half a torn sheet of blotting paper marked by the same blue ink curls she knew too well. The realization settled quietly, like snow falling indoors. Someone had sat here, under this lamp, rehearsing her name. Not once, many times, until the line between imitation and identity blurred. Her gaze lifted toward the window. The curtain fluttered slightly from a draught. Had they been disturbed? Interrupted? She looked around the desk again. One drawer stood ajar. Inside, a pile of discarded envelopes, each with faint pencil guidelines drawn for spacing. Her own address written, crossed out, rewritten, trial after trial. Marple's pulse stayed steady. She'd seen forgers before, small, desperate people who believed handwriting could fool truth itself. But this one was clever, this one was patient, and this one lived nearby. She leaned closer to the lamp, studying the ink stains around its base. Several small droplets marked the wood too fresh, still glossy. She reached for a tissue, dabbing lightly. The blue bled faintly into the white, the same iron blue. Then she saw it just at the edge of the desk. A single fingerprint, pressed in smudged ink, clear enough to see the whorls and ridges, frozen in half-light. Marple's breath caught for the briefest moment. She didn't move. The silence of the post office deepened, thick and knowing. Whoever had practiced her name had done it right here, under this very lamp. Someone careful, someone precise, someone who'd nearly gotten away with it. She straightened slowly, eyes never leaving the mark, and in a voice barely louder than the ticking clock she whispered, and left one blue fingerprint behind. The forgery has a face, and it's closer than she thinks. Morning brought a thin mist over St Mary Mead. Soft light fell through the lace curtains at St Mead Cottage. Miss Marple sat with, her tea cooling beside her, the letter spread open once more. The fire crackled faintly. Every word on the page seemed heavier now. Thank you for keeping my secret. A knock came brisk, familiar. She didn't rise. Come in, Dr. Haydock. He entered with his usual energy, coat unbuttoned, hat still in hand, but his cheer looked practiced today. He stood by the hearth, hesitating longer than usual before speaking. Jane, I've something on my conscience, he began. Something that's been rather inconveniently stirred up by all this letter business. Marple looked up mildly. Oh? Then perhaps the letter is already serving its purpose. He gave a wry smile. You always did make confession sound respectable. She waited. Silence stretched between them until he sighed and sank into the chair opposite. It happened years ago, he said at last. 5, maybe 6, before you'd remember the details. A death, ordinary, tragic, and quietly inconvenient. Marple's knitting rested in her lap. Go on. A young man, said Haydock softly. Harold Finch. Her gaze didn't flicker. I remember him. Mabel's brother. He nodded. Heart failure, the record said, but it wasn't. The fire popped once. He stared into the flames. Harold had been taking something, a stimulant. I warned him. But when the attack came, there was a woman involved. Married. Prominent. I couldn't destroy her reputation, or his memory. So, I altered the report. Marple's tone was calm. You falsified it. Yes. He exhaled slowly. One signature, one line. I thought it forgotten. And yet, said Marple softly, someone remembered. Haydock rubbed his forehead. Only one person ever knew. I told Mabel Finch. She was devastated, but she understood. She said she'd keep my secret to her grave. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And the letter? His brow furrowed. What about it? She handed it to him, the first one, her own name on the front, the single line inside. He read it once, then again. Good Lord. It fits rather well, doesn't it? He sat back, face pale. Thank you for keeping my secret. It could only refer to that. Yes, said Marple, unless it means something more. He shook his head. She wouldn't. Mabel's loyal. She worshipped her brother. Loyalty, Marple murmured, is a fine thing, until guilt twists it. Haydock's eyes rose to meet hers. You think she's behind the letters? I think, she said gently, she's behind more than she realizes. He frowned, uneasy. I never meant to harm her. I only wanted to spare them both shame. Of course, said Marple. But the truth, Doctor, doesn't stay buried. It only changes its handwriting. Outside, the church bell began to toll the noon hour. Slow, hollow, steady. Haydock stood, voice roughened now. If Mabel's found out, she'll feel I've betrayed her. Marple rose too, folding the letter carefully. She already believes that, she said. The question now is what she plans to do about it. He stared toward the window, jaw tight. You think she's dangerous? Marple's tone stayed quiet. I think she's frightened, and frightened people can be clever. The fire crackled softly between them. Outside, the bell fell silent. Marple's eyes moved to the letter again, the blue ink glinting faintly. She spoke almost to herself. But who's protecting whom now? The secret once meant mercy. Now it smells of guilt and revenge. It was nearly dusk when Miss Marple arrived at Mabel Finch's cottage. The lamps inside glowed faintly through lace curtains. Snow had begun again, soft flakes, quiet as secrets. She knocked once, then again. No answer. The latch gave easily beneath her hand. Inside, the air smelled of ink, dust, and lavender soap. A small fire burned low in the grate. On the table lay Mabel's typewriter, its cover half removed, a sheet still rolled in the carriage. Miss Marple moved closer. The E key still struck slightly higher than the rest. The same uneven mark she'd seen pressed into the back of her mysterious letter. Beside it sat a brown leather case, clasp undone. She opened it gently. Inside were neatly stacked envelopes, blank, unsealed. Each bore printed postal labels, her own address, St Mead Cottage, St Mary Mead. Perfectly aligned, perfectly false. She lifted one and turned it in her hand. The edges weren't straight, cut by hand, not machine. The left side showed a tiny inward slant, the sort made by scissors guided by a left hand. Mabel Finch was left-handed, always had been. Miss Marple's expression didn't change. Only her fingers tightened slightly on the paper. She searched the case further. Beneath the envelopes was a smaller pouch tied with string. She untied it carefully. Inside old medical reports. The edges yellowed, the paper brittle. Doctor. Haydock's handwriting ran across the top of each page. Heart failure. Natural causes. Signed in his own steady hand. But at the bottom corner, faint impressions erased initials, overwritten signatures. Mabel's work. She had stolen them. Removed the real names, covered them with new ones, rewritten the record of her brother's death. Miss Marple stood still for a moment, listening to the clock tick against the silence. Outside, a branch scraped the window soft, rhythmic, like someone whispering at the glass. She turned to the desk. The typewriter ribbon was fresh, the ink bottle beside it uncapped, half full. Iron blue, the same tone stolen from Dr. Haydock's bag. On a small scrap of paper beside the machine, she saw it a test line, half-typed and abandoned. Thank you for keeping my secret. The exact words. The same rhythm, the same measured pressure. Marple drew in a slow breath. So that was it. Not malice, not at first. A grief turned clever, turned desperate. Mabel had forged the letters not to expose Haydock, but to divert him, to make the guilt circle elsewhere, to make it seem as if Miss Marple knew more than she did, and to buy herself time to destroy the proof she'd taken, The deception was tidy, domestic, almost affectionate, a woman grieving, protecting, hiding all at once. Marple replaced everything as she'd found it, straightened the envelopes, closed the typewriter case, and as she turned to leave, her eyes caught the mirror above the mantel. In its reflection, the faintest movement. The curtain stirred. A shadow shifted. Mabel stood in the doorway, pale, still, watching. She said nothing, only looked at Marple, then at the typewriter, then back again. Her voice, when it came, was soft and trembling. "You shouldn't have come." Marple met her gaze calmly. "No, my dear, but I had to." The silence stretched between them, fragile as glass. Then Marple spoke once more, barely above a whisper. "She didn't just copy my hand, she copied my mind. Imitation complete, truth waiting its final signature. Morning again. The snow was gone. Only thin patches lingered in the shade, like memories reluctant to leave. Smoke rose from chimneys. The postman whistled along the lane. Peace quiet, ordinary, earned. Miss Marple sat by her window, teapot steaming beside her. Sunlight touched the silver rim of her cup. It was the first warmth the village had felt in days. A soft knock came, then another. No urgency this time. "Mabel," said Marple gently. "Come in." The door opened slowly. Mabel Finch stepped inside, eyes downcast, hands clasped tightly before her. She looked smaller somehow, her usual tidy calm replaced by weariness. "Sit, my dear," said Marple. "I've poured you tea." Mabel hesitated. Then Saturday. Her fingers shook slightly as she lifted the cup. For a long while, neither spoke. Only the faint tick of the clock marked the moment. At last Mabel whispered, "You know, don't you?" "Yes." "And you told no one?" "No one," said Marple softly. "Not even Dolly. I thought you might wish to tell it yourself." Mabel's eyes filled, but didn't fall. "I never meant to harm you. I swear it. It all began when I saw Dr. Haydock again last week, and the old memories came back." Marple nodded. "The photograph. The files." Mabel's voice trembled. "He wasn't a bad man, Jane. My brother. He made a mistake. One stupid, reckless mistake. But when the doctor changed the report, it saved us all from scandal. It gave me peace. For a while. And then peace became a lie," she said softly. "Every time I passed the churchyard, I heard him in my head saying I should tell the truth. But I couldn't bear it. So I thought, if you had written forgiveness, if you had known then, maybe it would feel real." She looked up, desperate. "I only wanted to destroy his guilt by pretending you'd already forgiven him." Marple's expression was gentle. "You forged mercy, my dear. That is a rarer sin than cruelty." Mabel gave a faint, broken laugh. "Still a sin, though." "Yes," said Marple quietly, "but a very human one." She reached for the teapot and refilled both cups. The steam curled between them, faint and warm. Mabel's voice was barely a whisper. "When you found the letters, were you angry?" "No," said Marple, "merely saddened. Truth has a way of finding ink, even when we hide the bottle." They sat a while longer in silence, the kind that feels like understanding. Outside, a robin landed on the windowsill, bright, untroubled, alive. Finally Mabel rose. "I'll make it right, Jane. I'll return the doctor's files. I'll tell him I took them. I'll tell him why. He'll forgive." "You," said Marple, "because he already has." Mabel nodded once, her shoulders lightened. Then she turned toward the door. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For keeping my secret." The latch clicked softly behind her. Marple sat a moment longer, watching the sunlight shift across the table. She smiled. Small, kind, complete. "Even false letters," she murmured, "carry real feelings." Outside, the village clock chimed the hour. The wind moved gently through the bare branches. Order restored. Truth, once more, had written itself again. The mystery fades, leaving warmth in its place.